Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. I am joined by Case Engelen of TITOMA. Case, great to talk to you. I normally talk to you from sunny Taiwan, and today you're in sunny Netherlands. You're not just moving you and your family, you're moving some of the business you look after as well. Tell me a little bit about what's going on in terms of the geopolitics and how that's affecting China, but also I'm curious how it's affecting Taiwan.
It's true that in the last couple of years, China has not done much to ingratiate itself with the international business community.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of our clients were asking for solutions outside of China. Our head office has always been in Taiwan, and we've taken some like 14 products or so that previously were made in China, and now all the components are still made in China, but we do final assembly and SMT in Taiwan, and that helps to negate the 25% import tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference. What about the, when we talk about people decoupling from China, which we're seeing a lot of regardless of just tariffs, partly for security, partly for mitigation of risk, and partly just a kind of a bit of a regionalization trend we're seeing around the world. How does that impact Taiwan? Does Taiwan kind of get caught in the same trend, and does Taiwan lose business, or is Taiwan a beneficiary? We hear about Mexico, Vietnam, and India perhaps being the three major beneficiaries of that decoupling with China. How do you see it from a Taiwanese perspective? And we'll talk about that before we talk about where else you're looking at building up manufacturing muscle.
Well, I've heard from some parties like anything related to defense in the US that Taiwan is more or less the same as China, so
Right.
We cannot do anything there.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, for me it's always been very much a safe haven, but very close to China, and with very close language and cultural connections. So I still think Taiwan is a good unsinkable mothership.
Yeah.
We've been coordinating manufacturing in China there for there's 15-20 years.
Yeah.
And at the moment, because for many years my friends were saying, why don't you come to China, and you should be here, and
yeah.
Was true, but we did manage to find a really good one, in particular, a really good factory. It's not so easy to find a good factory, but once you do and really stick with them and build them up, then it's really good. And so we have developed that over the years, but now. Just 10 minutes ago, I was speaking with a friend of mine, a foreigner who has been living in China for 20 plus years. And he said everybody is leaving China, and nobody in his right mind would start a new assembly factory here. It's
curious.
To be honest, are not good in China. It's one piece of news I just heard is that the components that go into car manufacturing, they need all to be made in China soon.
The Chinese cars?
Yeah, well, anything assembled in China, all the components need to be made in China.
Okay.
And so it's getting harder.
It just feels less global, doesn't it? Less globalization, and there's definitely a railing against that. And I also wonder if this old thinking of just chasing the lowest cost labor around the world has been replaced a little bit with a pragmatism about distributing manufacturing in different regions, and perhaps thinking a little bit more about proximity to the consumer as well as proximity to design. One of the things that I think has been really interesting throughout this trend, and we know that, I don't know if it's maybe 5 or 6 of the top 10 EMS companies in the world are Taiwanese companies. It's interesting seeing where they're starting to invest. And we're starting to see them invest in India. But what I'm hearing a lot of is them building up their manufacturing muscle and investing in Mexico for the North American market. Is that something you hear a lot about on the ground there in Taiwan?
Yeah, they're all looking abroad, and Vietnam is the easiest and closest by. I do have to correct you that China for the last 10 or even 15 years has not been about the lowest labor cost anymore. It's really about the components,
the supply chain
breadth and depth of their components. Anything you can find there, and that is now one of the factors that is starting to really affect people. Like I heard rumors that Apple, they stopped factories in India because they couldn't get the supply chain to work there, and they're opening up in China again. And one of the big issues in manufacturing is that there will always be problems. There will always be something not just quite right, and you can do really, really good QC, but very often you're only going to find the problem when you assemble everything together. And the big thing is in China, you send it back down the road, and you have it back the next day completely made as you want. If you send it to Mexico or to Vietnam, it's not possible to come back into China because they're going to charge you 30% import. And so that is a serious issue.
There are challenges there. There are challenges there. What you say about supply chain is really interesting. I always use the analogy that China used low-cost labor to kick the door open for the global manufacturing, and it was supply chain and logistics that kept that door open. And that's where they've grown in their success, and they've become this huge powerhouse. And I think that's really significant. And it's fascinating to see that, whilst people think, yes, I can move manufacturing and I can even build a manufacturing campus that's got, some supply chain support around it, actually shifting the whole supply chain globally is incredibly difficult. That's a complex super tanker of a vessel that takes a long time to turn around. And I think people are realizing that with the CHIPS Act, with the desire to have printed circuit boards, for example, manufactured in the Americas. All of those things are full of incentives and good ideas and some very wise words, but it's going to take a very, very long time for anything to happen. It really is a very slow process.
And like the friend I just spoke to, they got together a group of factories, and they opened their own little park in Vietnam. And they find that yes, labor is cheaper in Vietnam, but everything else is a lot more expensive. And so the overall cost to make something electronic in Vietnam is 25% higher.
And labor cost is just such a small part of it now. And the more automation we see, and I believe we're going to see more automation to meet the challenges of skill shortages. So I think it's a very complex story, and understanding the cost of ownership, the cost of risk, the approach to just in case.
Cost of chaos, I heard recently.
Cost of
chaos.
Cost of chaos. How do you measure the cost of chaos? Chaos is expensive. I appreciate that, but how do you actually measure that in dollars and cents is really challenging. What I also find fascinating, Case, is you've always had a very global outlook as to where stuff can be manufactured, and you're now dealing with a factory in Colombia, which I think is absolutely fascinating. I've been watching. I lived in Mexico for a while. I've been watching Zollner's success in Costa Rica, and kind of seeing what's going on there. I feel that South America has been that bubble that has never kind of inflated to its potential. So I'm curious what you're finding in Colombia and how you're managing to potentially build up some manufacturing and design muscle there.
Colombia is not the most obvious name in electronics, but our CTO happens to be from Colombia, and his professors at let's say the MIT of Colombia, they were really curious, and wow, somebody from our school, international electronics firm. And so we started this whole traineeship program where every 6 months we would take 5 trainees, the top graduates, and bring them to Taiwan for training, and then bring them back to Colombia for design and coding of firmware. And that's been working out really well. And now we're going the next step this year to do final assembly there as well. And that's the assembly as well is going well. We were still needing to wiggle out a few. Yeah, it's taking a bit longer than we would have liked to get things through customs and batteries and all that. But that's part of learning the ropes. But we're very happy with what we're seeing so far.
That is your own manufacturing footprint there, or is that existing manufacturing footprint?
But we're still in its infancy. It's like
small scale. Yeah. And is that largely for the US market? And what's the trading relationship between Colombia and the USA like?
They have their bilateral trade agreements, and anything that is assembled in Colombia is free to enter the US. No import taxes. So I do have to say that it's we can do S&T there. We do final assembly and a lot of testing there, but it's really all still based on China components. So because like you said before, the China component infrastructure that's not going to be replaced in 5 or even 10 years.
It's a decades process, isn't it? It's a very long one. But there seems to be, I don't know, there seems to be some momentum there, and I think I recently wrote a piece about friendshoring, and it's kind of, it's kind of hard to figure out who your friends are sometimes. And when you think of friendshoring, what are you actually defining your friends as? Are they people with similar ideologies? Are they people that have got better trading agreements than other parties? It seems to be a convenient version of friendship that allows people to select the geographies they manufacture in. But we're certainly in a stage where ideas of where stuff is manufactured are being challenged, and I see that as a good thing. And I think if we can perhaps shorten supply chains and perhaps get some environmental and sustainability benefits out of it at the same time, that would be attractive. But I absolutely agree that ship of supply chain dominance is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's something democratic. Like right after the World War II, Japanese manufacturing was known for shitty plastic little toys, and Japanese cars were laughed at for years. But they managed to go up to world-class level, and they achieved world-class, and then they plateaued. And then Korea and Taiwan and Singapore came up and started to lose a lot of their growth oomph.
Yeah.
And I think you're now seeing the same with China, that once you have caught up with all the knowledge and all the quality and all the design that there is in the world, once you have reached that global level, then it's very hard to continue an amazing growth curve.
Yeah.
And so it's a democratic
process.
force that now other countries can have their turn to join the game, which is good.
Yeah, I think it's very good. And I think what's interesting is to not only look at the attraction of places to manufacture in terms of the cost base and the supply chain and all of those kind of things, but also think about the consumer market that they're serving locally. So, the Southeast Asia, for example, has a huge population of some 800 million or so that are relatively young, relatively strong consumers. So they're interesting. China has a huge consumer market and a growing middle class. India has the potential to have the same, and maybe that'll be part of the future growth of that. It's fascinating to watch and interesting to see how it develops, and it's important to have people like you advising customers and advising people that are bringing new products to market on where they should be thinking about manufacturing to have that security. When a customer talks to you, particularly about a new product, but even an existing product, how high on their list of thoughts is that risk mitigation and that whole geopolitical discussion?
That really varies widely per customer. Some people, I don't care where it's made as long as it's good.
It's this price.
I get it here on time and it's got the right price. Whereas other people are very concerned, and management absolutely wants us out of there, and you have to find me some solution somewhere. And there is a lot of what if thinking. Like we have a big customer from India, and India has also had some strong movements about importing this and that from China. And what if we are next on the list? So a lot of people they want all sorts of quotations just to make sure that if something happens, what are we going to do then?
So scenario planning comes in as well, and that becomes important as well as risk mitigation. It's fascinating stuff. Keep doing what you're doing, Case. I think it's hugely valuable. It's hugely valuable to be able to talk to you and find out what you're seeing in different parts of the world. Excited to speak to you in the future and hear about what's going on in Colombia as well. I think it's always fascinating to see these new pockets pop up. We've seen them from time to time in Eastern Europe. Seeing them in South America is really interesting too. Thanks so much for your time, and I look forward to talking again soon. Thank you.
Great talking, Philip. Cheers.